In the dying light of a dust-bitten frontier town, Mara Dawson moved like a whisper along the edges of the abandoned orchard, her arms trembling not from fear but from hunger her own. And her daughters, the trees stood like skeletons against a bruised sky, holding out their final offerings, apples soft with rot, bruised to the core, abandoned as unfit for sale. To anyone else they were waste, but to a mother with 2 little girls lying on the cabin floor, too weak to cry, they were salvation, and she gathered them with desperate hands, ignoring the way the mush coated her palms and the sour smell clung to her clothes. Life had not always been this cruel. She remembered laughter, a husband with sunburned cheeks, a homestead that once thrived before drought and debt swallowed it whole. But now survival was a daily heist, one she executed with quiet shame, stealing apples no one wanted from land she once dreamed of buying. As she hurried back along the narrow path, her heart jolted when a low voice cut through the dusk. "Ma'am, you don't have to do that." Standing between the trees was a tall cowboy, hat shadowing his eyes but not the concern in them, hand resting casually near his belt, not on a gun, but on a worn leather satchel. Mara froze, her breath tangled in her throat. The cowboy stepped forward slowly, like approaching a frightened mare. "Name's Colt Ransom," he said, voice steady as a river stone. "And I been watchin' you come here for 3 nights. Ain't lookin' to accuse you of nothin'. Just no woman should have to steal rotten fruit to keep her babies alive." Shame and fury battled inside her, shame that he'd seen her, fury that she couldn't do better for her girls. "It ain't your business," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, kneeling to gather the apples she'd dropped. "But hunger is everybody's business." Then from that satchel he drew something impossible: fresh bread, smoked meat, a jar of early season preserves, and held them out like he was offering the world. Mara couldn't speak. Tears slid down her cheeks faster than she could hide them. "I ain't a skin for thanks," Colt said gently. "Just letting you know no one starves again. Not in this town, not while I'm breathin'." And, for the first time in months, hope flickered warm in her chest, fragile and trembling yet real. The next morning dawned gold over the prairie, and Mara woke to the scent of real food warming on the stovetop, her daughters eating with wide, stunned eyes as if afraid the bread might vanish. But hope was cautious. Life had taught her that kindness often carried a hidden price. So when Colt returned, leading a wagon stacked with sacks of grain, crates of vegetables, tools, and lumber, her instinct was to brace herself for the bills she could never pay. "You think I can take charity like this?" she asked, stepping outside. Her chin lifted though her voice trembled. Colt shook his head. "Ain't charity, it's a start." He explained how the drought had wrecked half the town, how folks had given up, how the strong farms were rationing while the weak ones starved. "I figure God didn't make land just to watch people die on it," he said, handing her a shovel. "You want to pay me back, grow something again, build something, help me show this town how." And just like that, a partnership formed, not built from romance or rescue, but from shared hunger for a life worth living. Together they repaired her fences, dug irrigation lines, planted hardy crops that didn't need much rain. Colt rallied neighbors with the same quiet fire in his voice, and soon the forgotten homestead became a meeting place. Women sewing blankets, men hauling timber, children learning two-men tools instead of picking through trash for leftovers. The orchard owner, ashamed after seeing how close he'd come to letting families starve, offered rights to the land for a season, then 2, every evening. Mara cooked meals big enough for anyone who showed up, her table once barren now overflowing. Word spread until even the sheriff admitted Colt's promise had become town law: no one starves again. One night, after months of back-breaking work and slow miracles, Mara stepped outside to find Colt leaning on the fence, watching the first green shoots rise under the moonlight. She stood beside him, silent for a long time. "I never asked why you helped me," she finally said. He shrugged, eyes still on the field. "'Cause someone once helped me when I was starvin'. Figured I should keep the chain unbroken." The wind carried the smell of growing earth between them, something like peace settling in her bones. She reached out, hesitant, unsure, and he took her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not a rescue, not a romance, not yet, but a beginning. And as laughter drifted from inside the house, her daughters laughing, fed. Alive, Mara Dawson realized the truth. Sometimes heroes wear dusty boots and speak softly. And sometimes the greatest salvation isn't a miracle at all, but a promise spoken beneath a tired orchard's branches. No one starves again. The summer sun rose fierce, and blinding the morning the riders appeared on the ridge, their silhouettes black against the blazing sky like a warning written across the heavens. And Mara felt the old fear crawl back into her bones, the fear she thought she'd buried beneath new crops and new hope. She was tending the irrigation trench with her daughters playing nearby, when the thunder of hooves rolled across the valley, and she saw Colt sprint from the barn, jaw set, hand hovering near the revolver he rarely used but always carried. The riders descended like a dust storm, 6 men with eyes hard as shale, led by a bearded brute named Riker Mallon, the same man whose greed had bankrupted half the town during the drought. "Heard you been playin' hero, ransom," Riker sneered as he dismounted, boot heels grinding the dry earth. "Heard you been feedin' folks who owe me." Mara stiffened. She owed Riker more than anyone that's left behind when her husband died, debts she could never repay. Colt stepped in front of her, and the girls' shoulders squared. "Folks don't owe you what you stole," he said quietly. "That time's over." Riker laughed, but there was no humor, only danger. "You can't just fix a town. Boy, you can't undo hunger with hard work and pretty words." He spat near Mara's feet. "And you little orchard thief, you think your luck's changed? You think charity makes you free?" Mara felt her daughters grip her skirt, their small bodies trembling, and something in her snapped, not from fear, but from the strength she'd earned through suffering. She stepped forward before Colt could stop her, meeting Riker's stare with a steel she didn't know she possessed. "I don't steal anymore," she said. "I grow, I work, and everyone here does too. You can't starve people who've learned to feed each other." Riker's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." With a flick of his wrist, his men began knocking over water barrels, smashing tools, tearing at the new crops like wolves tearing flesh. Mara shouted. Colt lunged. Townsfolk ran from every direction, but 6 armed riders were a storm they couldn't outrun. Just when it seemed the homestead would be ruined, the sound of a dozen more horses filled the valley. Sheriff Alden, the orchard owner, and a half-dozen farmers who had benefited from Colt's vow. They rode in not for violence, but for protection, forming a wall between the riders and the fields. Riker's smirk faltered as he realized the truth. The town had awakened. They weren't hungry, helpless victims anymore. They were fed, united, and unafraid. "You ain't welcome here," the sheriff declared, "and you ain't owed what you claim." For the first time, Riker looked uncertain. His power had always lived in people's empty stomachs. Now those stomachs were full, and his threats were hollow. With a final glare, he mounted his horse and signaled his men to retreat, dust swirling behind them as they fled the valley they once controlled. When the last hoofbeat faded, Mara collapsed to her knees, not in despair, but in relief, her daughters burying themselves in her arms. Colt helped her stand, brushing dust from her shoulders with trembling hands. "You faced him down," he whispered. She swallowed hard, tears burning her eyes. "I was tired of being hungry," she said. "Tired of being afraid." Colt smiled, a slow, proud smile that softened every hard line in his face. "You ain't alone anymore, Mara, and you never will be." As neighbors gathered, fixing what was broken, replanting what was torn, Mara realized something profound. The promise Colt made under the orchard was no longer his alone. It belonged to everyone. Now an unbreakable vow woven into the heart of the community. No one starves again. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe the future might hold not just survival, but joy. If you enjoyed this story and want chapter 2, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story. Your support keeps these powerful frontier tales alive.